Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Thursday, May 23rd, 2024. Kyle Anzalone from antiwar.com joins us now. Kyle, a pleasure, my dear friend. Thank you for sharing your time and your expertise with us. Is it true that the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mike Johnson from Louisiana, wants Ukraine to use American weapons and American ammunition to hit Russians inside of Russia?
Yep, that is exactly what Mike Johnson wants, and now he's trying to put pressure on the White House to get them to agree. And just this is, I think, pretty recent news, and it was just written up by my colleague at antiwar.com, Dave DeCamp. But he's been joined in this battle by Antony Blinken, our Secretary of State in the White House, who in the internal discussions among the Joe Biden administration, he is now advocating for the White House to greenlight Ukraine to use American weapons to hit targets inside of Russia.
All right, so let's get this straight. We have given billions and billions in weaponry. A new tranche of weaponry either has arrived or is on its way over there from and after that unfortunate vote over which Mike Johnson presided in the House of Representatives 2 weeks ago. But Joe Biden, to his credit, small credit, but credit, has said you can't use American weapons to fight inside of Russia. Now you're telling me that Mike Johnson, the Republican Speaker of the House, and Tony Blinken, the Democrat Secretary of State, are lobbying the president to remove that restriction and allow the Ukrainians to engage in an offensive war. They're on their last legs, but they're going to engage in an offensive war by attacking Russians in Russia with American weaponry.
Yes, that's absolutely what they want to happen. And the danger of this is, of course, Biden has allowed Ukraine to attack inside of Russia. And there have certainly been reports of Ukrainian neo-Nazi militias using American weapons, small arms, armored vehicles, things like that, to conduct attacks, cross-border raids, and kill people inside of Russia. Now, I think what they're talking about here is the ATACMS and other long-range missiles that the U.S. has given to Ukraine. They want the White House to support Ukraine in using those to attack Russia. And likely that support is going to go further than just saying to Zelensky, okay, you could do this, because essentially the White House has already done that. And what the White House statement has been recently on how Ukraine should wage this war is they say, we don't approve of Ukrainian attacks inside of Russia, but ultimately Ukraine chooses what they decide to hit. So Ukraine must need some U.S. support in carrying out these attacks, and that's probably intelligence and logistic and helping to set up these operations. And of course, Judge, this is incredibly dangerous. The most recent article that I wrote for the Libertarian Institute is about the Russian war games that are going on right now in southern Russia near the Ukrainian border, where they're drilling with their missiles that could carry tactical nuclear warheads. And they are doing this explicitly because NATO countries, so that's France, Estonia, and Lithuania, talked about sending their troops to Ukraine to train Ukrainians, and because the UK threatened to support Ukraine in using their long-range weapons to conduct attacks inside of Russia.
All right, so I have two observations. One is we interviewed, Judging Freedom interviewed our intrepid independent American journalist who comes to us from time to time, usually at 3 a.m. Eastern time, Patrick Lancaster, this morning. And Patrick says, and he lives and works in the area that Ukraine claims is still part of Eastern Ukraine, and Russia says under Russian law and international law is Russia. It is culturally Russian. But he says he is 100% certain that Western military equipment has been used and Western ammunition has killed Russians in Russia. And he showed us pictures of it. But he can't say for certain that it's American. Do you have other knowledge to say that you know, or your colleague who writes this up knows for a fact that it is American military equipment being used? I'm saying equipment to mean the projectiles, the instrument that sends the projectiles and the ammunition that has killed Russians. Because if that is the case, my second point, Russia can attack Americans, whether they're in Ukraine or whether they're in New Jersey.
That's a very interesting point, Judge. And I'm not aware of any kind of shelling, drone attacks, missile attacks that have been from the Ukrainian military directly inside of Russia. And I think I watched that interview this morning with Patrick Lancaster, and I really appreciated how nuanced he was about the weapons that are being used and if he confirmed if they were American or not. So that was a great discussion and great reporting on his part. Then there were American armored vehicles and small arms that were used by neo-Nazi militias. I believe this was reported either by the London Times or the Financial Times.
Let me just stop you, Kyle. Neo-Nazi Ukrainian militias.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Had conducted these cross-border raids into Russia. Previously, this was last year, sometime during the fall, that these raids were ongoing, and so yeah, American weapons have been used in Russia by Ukrainians.
Wow, this is crazy. But let me tell you how crazy it can get, because here's crazy and crazier. I'm not even going to tell you who this is. I'm sure you've seen her 100 times. You're probably sick of watching her. Chris cut numbers 5 and 6 consecutively.
They need to be able to stop these Russian attacks that are coming from bases inside Russia. So I think there's also a question of whether we, the United States and our allies, ought to give them more help in hitting Russian bases, which heretofore we've not been willing to do. I think if the attacks are coming directly from over the line in Russia, that those bases ought to be fair game, whether they are where missiles are being launched from or where they are where troops are being supplied from. I think it's time for that, because Russia has obviously escalated this war, including, as you said at the beginning, attacking Russia's second city, Kharkiv, which is not on the front lines, and trying to decimate it without ever having to put a boot on the ground. So I think it is time to give the Ukrainians more help hitting these bases inside Russia.
She's as much of a lunatic now that she teaches at Columbia University as she was before that. Chris, can you run the B-roll that you just texted me about? So this is what we call B-roll. So there's no sound, but this is fresh, and it is Russian military preparedness for their war games that you talked about, Kyle. President Putin ordered these drills as a response to perceived threats from the West. And these drills show, we understand, there they are, the use of missiles aimed at censuring the equipment that is ensuring equipment that is combat ready that are nuclear. This is what Victoria Nuland has cost us. Am I right?
Absolutely, Judge. And I think that clip of Victoria Nuland shows two things. One, she still seems to have significant influence. She says this in Mike Johnson, a Republican, and Antony Blinken, a Democrat. Both two people with a lot of influence are now making the same point that she was making. And the second point I think it shows is a column by another guest on your program, Aaron Mate, from earlier in this week. He explained that the increasing escalation by the West and all the threats is a sign of desperation. And so the fact that the West is now doing things like providing Ukraine with long-range missiles and now threatening to attack inside of Russia with them, things that they promised their people that they would not do at the start of this conflict, is a sign of how desperate they are and how bad Ukraine is losing at this time.